recorded. So those that are not attending due to time or work constraints will be able to watch it later. So Professor Qamar Cheema is a professor at International Relations at the National University of Modern Languages in Islamabad, and he is a visiting professor in several other universities in Pakistan and abroad. His research focuses on Islamist parties of Pakistan, the Indo-Pacific region, and South Asian politics. And he is a very well and respected commentator in national and international media. So, regarding Professor Luís Tomé, I'm going also to make a very brief commentary on his CV. He's a full professor at the Universidade Autónoma here in Lisbon, and where he is the director of the International Relations Department and its research unit, which is Observari, the Observatory of Foreign Relations. He is also a senior researcher at the Portuguese Institute of International Relations, and his work focuses on international relations, geopolitics, and security studies, specializing in the Euro-Atlantic, Euro-Asian, and Asia-Pacific region. So he's the author of several books and also very respected in his own area. Before I started, I would like to convey on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Portugal our solidarity with the people of Pakistan. We have been appalled by the images that are coming from your country, by the suffering of so many Pakistanis. And we are perfectly aware that what is happening in Pakistan right now could happen anywhere. And we sincerely hope that the international community responds to the urgent needs of so many people affected by the floods. As you know, this webinar will address global discourse on Indo-Pacific, the Pakistan response to the new rules-based basis order. And I will first give the floor to Professor Qamar Cheema, and then to Professor Luís Tomé, and afterwards we will have a period where those attending can ask questions and have a little debate. So thank you once again, and I'll give the floor right away to Professor Qamar Cheema.
Thank you very much, sir. It's my great honor and my privilege to speak at the Diplomatic Institute, and thank you very much to the Embassy of Portugal in Pakistan for arranging this wonderful academic initiative. Thank you very much for showing solidarity with the people of Pakistan. Obviously, Pakistan has been in grip of traditional security challenges in the last 20 years, and now Pakistan it seems is in grip of non-traditional security challenges in terms of floods, climate change, massive food insecurity issues, and so many other things. But since today's discussion is very important, and I'm sure we are going to have an interaction, and I will try to make how Pakistan thinks about the new global developments. For example, today's discussion on the global discourse on Indo-Pacific and what is Pakistan's response to this new rules-based order. Well, starting with my presentation and my point of view on Indo-Pacific as a region. In 21st century, this strategic rebalancing and repositioning are making great power curious and insecure in uncharted regions like Indo-Pacific. And Indo-Pacific as a geopolitical nomenclature has given a geographic and strategic reference to the region by replacing Asia-Pacific, which remained dominant construct for long. For more than 10 years, the term is being coined in official documents, including national security strategies and white papers. However, its geographical boundaries are not precisely defined. It extends the entire Indian Ocean from the US overseas territories such as Guam and American Samoa in the West Pacific to the US states such as Hawaii and California, and also includes nations bordering the two oceans. So and the important thing is that majority of the countries have different definitions of the Indo-Pacific region. But the region has many countries, obviously, which are the key engines of the global economy, as more than 60% of the world population is here, and one third of the global trade happens here. The region is one of the largest greenhouse gas emitter, which makes its case for industrial growth. With opportunities in this, and there are environmental, territorial, economic, and political challenges in the region. If I would just tell you that more than $5 trillion trade passes through the Strait of Malacca alone, so it has a huge significance, and for Pakistan as well. And I will have a whole time for the Pakistan, but first I want to tell you that what is, for example, the four major priorities of all states, as far as, and you can call it as a crux of Indo-Pacific doctrines of all countries. The first priority in the region of all great powers and the regional powers is to contributing regional stability through security and military cooperation. This is a consensus understanding among all the powers. The second priority is preserving free and open access to maritime lines of communication. Everybody agrees on this. The third priority is to contribute to the strategic stability in the Indo-Pacific by multilateral actions to strengthen regimes like nuclear non-proliferation. The fourth priority is to deal with the catastrophic climate events. Now, nature is involved in geopolitics in 2020, in 21st century. That this is what we are seeing. Since this talk is about the global discourse on Indo-Pacific, now let me share with you some of the thoughts of the major parts which have perspective on Indo-Pacific, and then I will, in the last part, I will give Pakistan's view on that. Well, first I will talk about the Japan's view on this. In 2007, during his first term of the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he delivered a speech whose title was Confluence of Two Seas to the Indian Congress. He gave that speech, and he presented his vision of a closer political and economic connectivity between the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. Many people believe that it was his vision, and based on the intensive cooperation among the democratic states of the region, which has to serve the center of the network spanning the entire Indian Ocean and Pacific. So the Japanese wanted free flow of persons, goods, capital, and knowledge that would guarantee freedom of prosperity. According to the former prime minister, the security of the shipping routes is of central strategic importance in this respect. And although by the way, the new government subscribes to what Abe has said. So the connectivity concept also emphasizes on universal norms, which are intended to closely link the democracies in the region politically and economically, and to regulate the behavior of non-democratic states, including China. So in this context, the Japanese proposed in 2007 to establish the quadrilateral security dialogue, which consisted of Japan, Australia, India, and the United States. However, initially it couldn't deliver, and this concept was only about looking at the non-traditional security threats, but now Quad is officially active. And if you just look at the Quad is not just the only institution which is coming, is not the only multilateral forum, but you might have heard about the I2U2, which is Israel, India, US, and United Arab Emirates. So this is a new era of institutional order and rules-based order. Well, what the Japanese have been saying is that Chinese aggressive behavior in Asia, they basically propose that there should be a formation of democratic coalition, which should have Japan, Australia, India, and other countries, so that everything goes normal. So Japan was the first country to come up with this, and they initiated this idea. The second is the most important, obviously, the country is the United States. If you go back in 2011, the Obama administration, they put up a major strategic shift in global politics and they drafted its first strategy for Asia Pacific. So the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton came up with a very powerful article in the Foreign Policy magazine, America's Pacific Century. And the major theme of that strategy was that the United States is a global power and the future of the American power will be decided in Asia, not in the mountains of Afghanistan or in the streets of Iraq. So Obama administration, um, they categorically said that the Iraq war was a war of choice and we are going out of it. So they put a lot of diplomatic, political, and economic capital in the Indo-Pacific. Now, the United States calls this region an important area of the future of the world. President Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, they have invested politically and strategically in the region. And obviously, President Biden has given a momentum to this multilateralism. So, and President Trump, who have been supporting multilateral initiatives, but there is a consensus and bipartisan support within the US to have future investments in Indo-Pacific. There have been many initiatives which the Americans have taken, including the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, whose recent meeting, I think, just happened in Los Angeles in US, where many countries from the region are participating. And they're working on clean energy, they're working uh, on climate issues, they're working on taxation issues. And at the same time, uh, 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 along with that, another multilateral institution like AUKUS, Australia, US, and UK was established because the Indians refused to be part of the Quad and to make Quad a military component. So they came up with this new institution called AUKUS, where Australia, Great Britain, and the United States are going to have a military component as well. So this new law of institutions is there and they're focusing on Indo-Pacific. So much of the world's history is being written in Indo-Pacific for coming years. France. Why I mentioned France? Because France has its own Indo-Pacific strategy. The French believe the United States was moving back from its ideational leadership under the President Trump, and the United Kingdom left the European Union. So the ideational leadership of the Western liberal world was very much needed. And at the same time, they believe that the Americans, when went to the Indo-Pacific, they didn't take into consideration the perspective of the European Union. So, and particularly starting from even President Obama, then President Trump, and they believe that the Biden will listen to any multilateral initiative in Indo-Pacific. But so far, they believe they have not been listened. France, being a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council and one of the founding member of the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has a strategic role to play in the contemporary global environment. The reason behind it is that France has the overseas territories in Indo-Pacific. There are about 7 overseas territories, and these territories, the French believe, are active connecting points. And that is why France calls itself an Indo-Pacific nation, because of its overseas territories, which expand from African coastline to the western shores of the America. And France has expanded the region more than the US and gives this part of the world a different territorial definition. And the French overseas territories in the Indian Ocean are the Glorious Islands, Tomalin, Scattered Islands, Reunion, Crozet Islands, Kerguelen Islands, Amsterdam, and St. Paul Islands. Whereas French overseas territories in the Pacific are New Caledonia, French Polynesia, Clipperton, and Wallis and Futuna. So the French have invested a lot in the region. Coming to the China, which is obviously is a country about whom everybody is worried these days because of its authoritarian trends. Well, China's rise and its influence in its backyard forced global powers to constrain the rise of China from the perspective of the geopolitics and geoeconomics. In 2013, China introduced a Belt and Road Initiative, which had 6 corridors of economic prosperity in the region. And BRI was aimed at creating a network of transport, aviation, port, and energy-related infrastructure projects across nation so that Chinese supply chain could have smooth reach. Well, China comes up with a different view. When the West talks about the shared values promoting democracy, human rights, freedom of expression, freedom of media, the Chinese talk of shared destiny and comprehensive strength. For them, shared destiny is only about economy, business, and comprehensive strength is only comes when you only engage with the business. So they don't talk about the value part of that. That is why the Western countries, particularly the Americans, they're calling the China obviously authoritarian and making that we have a competition and we have to deal with this authoritarian trends. Well, China is reaching all states in the region politically, diplomatically, and economically, including to the Pakistan, for preparing its countermeasures peacefully and positively. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which shocked the world, obviously the whole world, the Chinese economy was not largely affected. This has assured the global community and the region that China is a stable power and its economic, military, and strategic interests will not be affected. But China is extremely disturbed by the global presence in Indo-Pacific because they were not expecting at initial stage that this major global investment will be in the region. Now, the most important country, obviously, of the region is India, on whom particularly every Western country is banking up, including French, including Great Britain, including America as well. And that is India. Now, Indian foreign policy in the past revolved around non-alignment and strategic autonomy. But with the rising global competitions in the Indo-Pacific region, Indian government normally, doesn't issue white papers on defense and foreign policy, but few documents have highlighted Indo-Pacific, and now they have a full-fledged part of the Quad, and they're coming up with the new documents. So India realized a shift is needed from Euro-Atlantic to Indo-Pacific, and for this, India has developed its Act East policy as well. Indian maritime security strategy speaks of changes in the region and suggests to government to adopt a more robust foreign policy for Indo-Pacific. And India has come up with its own aircraft carriers as well, the indigenously developed aircraft carrier, because they understand the future of Indo-Pacific, they understand the future of the Indian Ocean and how to take care of the communication lanes where the global trade happens. So a lot of investment is coming. Obviously, this term Indo-Pacific, since the United States has renamed its Pacific Command to the Indo-Pacific Command, this gives India a global outreach and a nomenclature of its ocean getting global acceptance. India had a Look East policy since 1991, and now it adopted Act East policy. So India moved from Southeast Asia to Indo-Pacific with a changing regional strategic framework. Coming to just the ASEAN part and then to the Pakistan, about ASEAN, I would say that I have met many countries, many diplomats, and many army officers, and many academia from the ASEAN countries, and they believe that they discourage being part of the competition of the global powers. They believe in the idea of shared destiny and the comprehensive strength as well. They want to support in safeguarding communication lanes and maritime security. This is where the ASEAN believe that they are going to have an advantage. And the ASEAN countries all believe in support in times of the natural disasters. So they discourage taking sides. They believe that the region wants non-traditional security measures so that at the end of the day, the region has some sort of stronger position. Now, coming to the most important, obviously, part, and that is Pakistan. Well, to be frank, Pakistan's response to the new rules-based order has not been the way many people in Pakistan were expecting. Since we believe that the much of the world's history is being written in this part of the world, uh, Pakistan's foreign policy and national security largely dependent how the Western powers, particularly the United States, has its position in the region. Since America withdrew from the region and they don't need Pakistan, so Pakistan's national security issues and foreign policy is in trouble. If you, in United States, obviously, uh, uh, the State Department and the White House, their geostrategic distribution is different in the region. So they keep Pakistan in South Asia and Central Asia. The State Department and the White House doesn't put Pakistan into the Indo-Pacific. And the Department of Defense, they have its own distribution and configuration of the Pakistan. Uh, Pakistan so far as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, has not got any invitation at any platform as far as making its pace is concerned. But uh, what we call is that where obviously the Western world is worried about Pakistan, Pakistan's position on the new groupings, particularly on this Indo-Pacific, is that Pakistan says that we have no issue about the new multilateral forums as long as they are inclusive. And these institutional frameworks do not target the third country. And these institutions are non-discriminatory. So in reality, what Pakistan says is that these new institutional frameworks excludes China, and we are not part of it, and Pakistan has not been invited to it. So Pakistan obviously believes, and then all the great powers, even in the United States, they are having India as a major defense partner, and the United States has given India preferential treatment when it comes to the military hardware. Even the recently the S-400, which the Indians got from from Russia, the U.S. Congress gave a special waiver to the Indians. Although there are CARTSA, there is an act which is applied on those countries which get military assistance from Russia, they are punished. So since this is the most important thing, which is which one must understand before I make my case. Well, Pakistan has some sort of relevance and the value because before 1971, when Pakistan was divided and the Bangladesh was East Pakistan, and at that time, Pakistan was the member of the global institutions like CETO, CENTO. These were the Cold War institutional arrangements. Pakistan still has, and Pakistan still wants to be in the region, but Pakistan's foreign policy initiatives are not that much new. Pakistan has a 700 kilometer long coastal line, and in 2020, Pakistan declared as a year of the blue economy. And Pakistan believes that Pakistan's navy is powerful. Pakistan is a nuclear weapon state, obviously, and Pakistan can contribute to the maritime security if Pakistan gets some sort of value. So this huge maritime potential. All what Pakistan needs is to revitalize its shipping sector, as well as Pakistan needs to obviously invest in the maritime area, because largely our investment have not been into the maritime area. So Pakistan at this moment needs a major shift, because Pakistan's foreign policy has normally been aligned with the Arab countries, with the Western powers, particularly with the United States and some European countries. And Pakistan must revise its checkbook diplomacy. The world is changing, obviously, and what we believe in Pakistan, what the academia is suggesting and asking the government of Pakistan, that Pakistan needs to look towards ASEAN, and Pakistan must not put it all eggs in one basket, and that is China. And Pakistan must initiate bilateral arrangements with the countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and all these ASEAN countries, and must have bilateral strategic mechanism so that, and at the same time, Pakistan must not be viewed as a country which comes under the Chinese axis, but Pakistan needs to keep a balance, obviously, between the Western powers and the Chinese, because China is one of the closest of our neighbor, and China has been helping a lot to Pakistan. But this is one of the reasons that the Western powers, they are looking towards Pakistan in a different way, because they believe that Pakistan has become as a Chinese, Pakistan is under the Chinese influence, and Pakistan is looking Indo-Pacific as if the world is helping India to be the major power in the region, and this Pakistan believes this is creating an imbalance, strategic imbalance in the region. So this is from my side, the perspective. If there will be any question, I will love to answer those, please.
Thank you, Professor. What we are going to do is that I will give the floor to Professor Luís Tomé, and then I'll open for questions. So thank you very much for your intervention. Professor Luís Tomé, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador Freitas Ferraz. Let me begin by thanking the Embassy of Portugal in Pakistan and the Diplomatic Institute for granting me the privilege of delivering this talk to such a distinguished audience. Many thanks also to all the participants who honor me with your presence here, even if in online mode. And of course, a special greeting to Professor Qamar Cheema, with whom I have the honor of discussing today Pakistan in Asian and world geopolitics. But first of all, dear Professor Cheema, in your person, I also address my deepest sympathy and solidarity to all Pakistanis who are suffering from the devastation caused by the recent floods in Pakistan. 33 million people have been affected in a disaster that has put 1/3 of Pakistan underwater, has left nearly 1,400 people dead, more than 1 million people homeless, and several million displaced from their original places. So we are all hoping for a quick and adequate response from the international community to the dramatic calls made last weekend by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres for massive global support for Pakistan. Well, the geopolitics of South Asia, Indo-Pacific, and the world, which opened up numerous opportunities for Pakistan, came with its share of disturbances, rivalry and confrontation with India since its independence, Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan, emergence of Taliban, presence of Al-Qaeda, US-led war on terror, which ended in a hasty departure, the COVID-19 pandemic, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine had impacted Pakistan enormously. Pakistan, in my view, is a middle power and a vital component of the mosaic in regional and global interests. Today, Pakistan faces the geopolitical challenge of balancing between US, West, and China-Russia camps, while continuing managing its rivalry with India and also balancing between Turkey, the Arab countries, and Iran. But since it is not possible to address all the issues now, I have chosen to organize my talk answering three main questions that seem essential when reflecting on Pakistan in the new Asian and world order, perhaps complementing Professor Cheema's previous stimulating address. What Pakistan fear and hope to gain from the Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan? Second, in what way the Russia's invasion of Ukraine impact Pakistan? And thirdly, what does it mean for Pakistan, the growing geopolitical competition and tension between the US and China? So, concerning the first question, what Pakistan fear and hope to gain from the Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan? With the Taliban victory, Pakistani fear of Afghan alignment with its rival India has vanished, as India has always been bitterly opposed to the Taliban due to their support for the Islamist revolt in Kashmir. Since the 1980s, however, another combination of Pakistani fears emerged concerning Afghanistan, that of Afghan refugees causing destabilization in Pakistan. During the Afghan war in the 1980s, some 3 million, mostly Pashtun refugees, fled into Pakistan. These refugee camps became fertile recruitment grounds first for the Mujahideen and then for the Taliban. The refugees, to a considerable extent, merged with the Pashtuns of Pakistan and the Afghan Jihad after the Soviet Union's invasion in 1979, and then also later after the US-led invasion in 2001, received passionate support for many Pakistani Pashtuns, especially in the tribes that straddle the border with Afghanistan. Intense US pressure led the Pakistani government of General Pervez Musharraf to attempt a selective crackdown on anti-American Islamist fighters who had fled Afghanistan for the tribal areas of Pakistan. The result was an escalating series of mainly Pashtun Islamist revolts in Pakistan that in 2007 came together to found the jihadist group Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP. The resulting civil war in Pakistan cost some 60,000 dead including 8,000 soldiers and former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. Thus, in addition to wanting to limit any influence of India in Afghanistan, the other Pakistani reason for helping the Afghan Taliban has therefore been to make sure that they do not support Pashtun Islamist rebellion within Pakistan. Pakistan confidence in this has been increased by the appearance in recent years of a common enemy of Pakistan, of its regional and global partners, and also the Afghan Taliban, the Islamic State or Daesh. ISIS are bitter rivals of the Taliban in Afghanistan and have recruited a considerable number of Taliban dissidents and other South Asian jihadists. This gives Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban a common enemy. But there is a risk that if the Taliban experience internal dissent over how to govern, the disappointed elements are likely to gravitate to ISIS and threaten Taliban unity and rule. The Afghan Taliban has publicly renounced international terrorism and jihadism, and have given specific assurances also to Moscow and Beijing that they will not support Chechen and other Islamist rebels against Russia, Uyghur rebels against China, and the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan and other Central Asian jihadi groups. They have also promised Iran not to provide bases for anti-Iranian Sunni rebels. The Taliban can probably be trusted on this, since they can hardly afford to face the hostility of their entire region. Pakistan hopes, therefore, that the regional coalition of itself, China, Russia, and Iran, will support the Taliban against ISIS, ensure that the Taliban themselves do not back international extremism, including an Islamist revolt in Pakistan, and refrain from backing Tajik, Uzbek, and other ethnic forces against the Taliban state. These then are Pakistan's hopes concerning Afghanistan, with implications also for its relations with China, Russia, and Iran. But as Pakistanis would be the first to admit, Afghanistan has a long tradition of disappointing outside hopes and frustrating well-laid plans. Either way, after 43 years of war in Afghanistan, which affected Pakistan directly, the country does not want to live with or be a party to any new conflict in Afghanistan. The second question is, in what way the Russians' invasion of Ukraine impacts Pakistan? Pakistan's limited participation in global supply chains does offer it some protection from the economic repercussions of the war in Ukraine. Nevertheless, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is putting Pakistani already devastated economy under increased pressure. There are two vital commodities exported by Ukraine and Russia, and it happens that Pakistan is an importer of both wet and oil products. The latter status as a prime exporter of oil and gas, and now being slated with Western sanctions, has sent the global markets, especially energy markets, into hunter frenzy. The supply shortages of these commodities has constrained their global supply, resulting in increased prices and the import bill for Pakistan also. The impact of wet shortages and price hike is likely to make its impact manifested in the near future negatively in Pakistan as well. Hence, the worsening of Pakistan's already very sensitive economic situation may naturally bring even more difficulties for the embattled coalition government in Pakistan to manage, and end up increasing social and political instability. Additionally, the thought Western sanctions on Russia endanger the planned construction of the $2.5 billion Pakistan Stream pipeline, originally named the North-South Gas Pipeline, which would connect Pakistan's Punjab province with LNG terminals in the port city of Karachi, and is vital for keeping up the infrastructure with the country's growing energy consumption. The project is to be built in collaboration with Russian companies, with the government of Pakistan providing 74%, while Russia providing 26% of financing. Pakistan hoped to establish close energy cooperation with Russia through the Pakistan Stream pipeline and other future projects, but it is uncertain at this point if and how this will move forward in the near future. On the other hand, Russia's invasion of Ukraine seems to have contributed to, or at least accelerated, the ouster of former Prime Minister Imran Khan through a parliamentary vote of no confidence in April this year. It is true that before Khan's rise to power in August 2018, Pakistan had been cooling its relations with the US, strengthening its axis with China, and moving closer to Russia. For example, Pakistan became a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization led by China and also Russia in 2017, jointly with India, and which was also joined by Iran in September last year. Also, the US has provided Pakistan with more than $3 billion in arms since 9/11. Those transfers have dropped significantly since 2016, while Russia has become the third largest arms supplier to Pakistan, after only China and Sweden, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. But it is also true that before his ouster, former Prime Minister Imran Khan took a more aggressive stance towards the US and the West. Khan has made anti-Americanism a part of his political persona, accusing the US in 2020 of martyring Osama bin Laden. After the fall of Kabul in August last year, he endorsed the Taliban takeover and remarked that the people of Afghanistan, in defeating the US, had broken the shackles of slavery. And in February this year, Khan arrived in Moscow for a 2-day official visit, the first such trip by a Pakistani prime minister in 23 years, after Russia's recognition of eastern Ukrainian enclaves of Donetsk and Luhansk, and on the day that Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine, drawing attention to Pakistan's evolving relationship with Russia. Opposition accused Khan of economic mismanagement and rights abuses using, and also a false corruption narrative to consolidate his power. But former Prime Minister refuses to go away quietly and claims that this ouster was orchestrated by the US with help from the army leadership. Of course, the new country's government of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Pakistani army slams ex-Prime Minister's defamatory remarks. Meanwhile, Khan, who has the now opposition Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf PTI party, was charged with terrorism for remarks made at public speeches in August, and 2 days ago, a court in Pakistan has extended the pre-arrest bail of Imran Khan in the terrorism case till at least September 20. It is, of course, very difficult to establish a relationship between Khan's ouster and the war in Ukraine. But as an observer, I cannot help but notice the context in which it happened, and the fact is that the new coalition government of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, elected by the Pakistani parliament in April, is trying to reframe the relationship with the West. Still, Islamabad resists condemning the invasion and criticizing Moscow, and even reaffirming the commitment to the principles of the UN Charter, to international law, and respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. Pakistani has abstained from successive votes involving Russian aggression against Ukraine. Despite claiming and stressing its status as a democracy in a world increasingly divided between democracies and authoritarianisms, Pakistan's position is not a surprise. Islamabad simply doesn't want to offend its new strategic partner, Russia, and thereby contribute to strengthening ties between Moscow and rival India. On the other hand, Pakistan, India, and China officially proclaim the same policy of respect for Ukraine's sovereignty, and that Russia's security requirements must be duly met. No doubt, in a very complex geostrategic chessboard, Pakistan's neutrality towards the Russian invasion of Ukraine also has a lot to do with the positioning of its ally China and its rival India. And that brings us to our third and final question. What does it mean for Pakistan the growing geopolitical competition and tension between the US and China play out in Asia, Indo-Pacific, and the world. The complex geopolitical environment that surrounds Pakistan has traditionally led the country to ally itself with the US and China. But now China is the primary rival to the US supremacy, and in Asia, Indo-Pacific, the two superpowers are contenders for hegemony in the same geographical space. The strategic competition between the two giants and the attempts to revitalize old alliances, as well as forming new balancing coalitions, has placed the middle powers of the Asia-Pacific, like Pakistan, in a tight spot to choose between either of the two superpowers. Pakistan has been an ally of the United States during the Cold War and the War on Terror. However, ties between Pakistan and the US have been loosened over the last years. At the same time, rival India, not Pakistan, became America's partner of choice in South Asia and in the Indian Ocean, while India's relations with China deteriorated over disputed borders in the Himalayas. In parallel, another strategic ally, China, was flush with cash and confidence, and so embarked on a massive push to expand its global economic and strategic influence. And Pakistan opted to reinforce the alliance with the rising superpower. China is now by far the major trading partner of Pakistan, with a share of 23% of global Pakistani trade, while the US is the third largest Pakistan's trade partner with only a 9.6% share, according to the European Commission data. Also, China is by far the main supplier of arms to Pakistan, counting 72% of the country's total imports in the 27-21 period, according to the CPRI. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, launched in 2015, has been designated as the flagship project of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, linking China's western landlocked region of Xinjiang with Pakistan's Arabian Sea ports. Pakistan also lies at the crossroads of China's digital Silk Road and acts as a gateway for Pakistan East Africa Connecting Europe, or PEACE cable, an internet cable out of China into the Arabian Sea. Apart from existing connectivity with global internet owned mainly by the US West, Pakistan has got alternate internet connectivity through a Chinese network. Additionally, Pakistan is planning to build a number of IT parks with Chinese cooperation and will become an important host country for the 5G internet provided by the Chinese tech giant Huawei through the PEACE cable. Concurrently, Pakistan is the only country using the Chinese alternative to GPS, Beidou, for military purposes, while cooperation in the military application of new age information technology is already on the rise. Pakistan was also one of the first countries to welcome the latest display of China's ambitions to be a leader in global governance and security architecture, the Global Security Initiative, unveiled by President Xi Jinping at the World Forum for Asia in April this year. Pakistani leaders of various governments and political tendencies have repeated in recent years that Pakistan would not participate in any next Cold War. Yet Pakistan may be drawn in. The intensified strategic competition between the US and China in connection with the ongoing decoupling of its economies is leading to increased polarization, which will make it almost impossible for a country to live in two competing world orders simultaneously. Yet, that is what Pakistan seems to want to do. The global trends and US regional posture favoring India could lead Pakistan to either seek an even closer partnership with China or accept a role within the US Indo-Pacific strategy. It is difficult to provide an exact timeline on Pakistan's shift from US-led world order, given China itself has not completely decoupled from that order yet. But there are visible signs that Pakistan is moving to integrate more deeply into the Chinese-led geoeconomic and geopolitical order. Still, Pakistan's complete integration into a Sino-centric international order is not inevitable. And the current Pakistani leadership insists that it wants to recalibrate relations with the US. However, To truly repair relations with Washington, Pakistan would have to revise its foreign and security policy, especially vis-à-vis India, Russia, and China, which might not be possible in the short term. So in the last couple of years, senior Pakistani officials have signaled that from now on, their country's foreign policy will emphasize geoeconomics. The new thinking aims at making Pakistan a geoeconomics hub and project its image as a responsible stakeholder focused on development. But good intentions aside, Pakistan's pivot toward geoeconomics is likely to hit the brick wall of reality, and fast. For starters, the country cannot easily escape geopolitics. Pakistan was relevant decades ago, relevant today, likely will remain relevant in the future too, but is likely to pay a hefty price for relevance and the geopolitical direction of one of the world's 9 nuclear powers at a time when war in Ukraine has sent global tensions soaring, is under pressure and scrutiny. For some, Pakistan is a failing state, but it never seems to fail, nor does it well succeed in spite of all its potential. The region and the world need a stable and secure Pakistan. The last thing anyone wants is the collapse of a nuclear-armed country with possible takeover of its nuclear assets by terrorists. Despite all the problems, Pakistan has shown remarkable resilience. While it still is far from what her potential is, the journey continues. Being able to promote its national interests in a complex and hostile geopolitical environment is never easy for a middle power like Pakistan, and not many countries in the world can claim to navigate through the stormy water that surrounds cheap Pakistan. This is the reality of Pakistan, in my view, as it continues to progress against all external and internal odds. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Luís Tomé. Thank you so much. I didn't notice at the beginning, but both ambassadors, the Portuguese ambassador in Islamabad and the Pakistani ambassador here in Lisbon, are attending. So I want to salute them directly. And I'm open the floor for questions. So please, those that want to write them, write in the chat. Those that want to do it orally, just raise your hand. And I see that the ambassador of Pakistan in Lisbon had just asked for the floor, so I will give you the floor. Please, ambassador, take the floor. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Faraz. I thank the Diplomatic Institute and Portuguese Embassy in Islamabad for organizing this seminar on a very important issue. And I also thank Dr. Qamar Cheema and Professor Luís Tomé for sharing their thoughts on this important subject. I take this opportunity to thank the government of Portugal to express solidarity with us at this difficult time. As already mentioned by Professor Luís Tomé, the extent of the devastation which the recent flooding has caused in Pakistan is still unfolding. The figures are horrendous, and the losses which we have suffered are unprecedented. For expressing solidarity with us, and we are still in the process of making accurate estimates of the losses and the destruction which these floods have caused. But the Secretary General mentioned figures which are huge figures, and we are very thankful to the international community, to our partners for extending assistance to us at this difficult time. On the subject, I just wanted to participate and take benefit from the worthy speakers or their perspective on the subject I quickly make one or two, three, 4 points. First of all is that peaceful and stable Asia Pacific is priority of Pakistan. Number two, we believe that this region should not become an arena for strategic competition. And number three, as we have seen in recent health emergencies, and now in this flood situation because of the negative impact of the climate change, global climate change, to which Pakistan's contribution is minimal. We think that now it's for the international community to work collaboratively, cooperatively, and join hands to address the global situation instead of these strategic competitions. And we stand ready to join all efforts which promote international cooperation among the international community. We are also committed to the fundamental principles of the UN Charter: peaceful resolution of disputes, peaceful resolution of disputes through dialogue, including the long-standing disputes of Pakistan, India, Jammu and Kashmir dispute I referred to. Then I also wish to make a point that from 2007, 2006, 2007 to 2015, we conducted extensive law and order operations in the areas adjoining Pakistan and Afghanistan. And those operations were successful. We were able to eliminate the terrorist sanctuaries from there, and we destroyed their capacity to inflict terrorism in any part of the world. That is why we continue to maintain the position that no country should provide any sanction to terrorism or any terrorist activity in any country in the world. We remain also at the same time committed to be a strong partner in all endeavors. Yes, we are now very much working on focusing on geoeconomics, as already pointed out, and we remain firmly committed to join all efforts which promote peace, stability, and development in our region and beyond. I thank once again the speakers for sharing their thoughts with us, and the Institute and the Portuguese Embassy for joining, for making this platform possible. Thank you so much, Ambassador Siraj.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I noticed that we already have 2 questions here on the right side on the chat. Dr. Qamar, can you see them? The questions, can you read them? Professor Luís Tomé, did you notice that there are 2 questions?
Well, yeah, I can read them, but
yeah,
I think probably Professor Qamar Cheema is in a better position than I am to answer, or at least answer first. If you please, so, Professor Cheema.
The first to Maria Beatriz Marquilhas. Beatriz, please.
Yeah, I can read the question and I can answer that.
Please do.
Thank you very much. As far as this question, thank you very much, Maria, for this question of this climate change. Obviously, this is a non-traditional security threat which Pakistan is facing right now. And let me tell you that Pakistan, as I mentioned in the start, that Pakistan remained occupied in the first 15 years of this century in fighting the traditional security threats like terrorism, extremism, and so many other things. But now Pakistan, with a country of 220 million people, is facing obviously climate change as a major threat. What now, let me tell you, in 2005, we had a major earthquake. In 2010, we had floods. So Pakistan has established a fundamental infrastructure, at least in the shape of National Disaster Management Authority, to tackle these things. But obviously, the climate change, the rains which we had, the floods which we have seen, these are unprecedented in the history of the country. These rains have never happened before. One thing. Obviously, no country could have faced this kind of floods alone. So this is one thing. The country is committed. Obviously, we need funding, we need resources, we need to put the money on the right side, because obviously what is going to happen is that the agriculture sector is going to be affected. There is a possibility of migration, because people from villages, towns, they may have to migrate because large swaths of population are facing these floods. Obviously, these towns and villages and cities, they didn't have the capacity even how to throw water, because the water is static and it's not going down to the river or other places. So obviously for that, infrastructure is needed. But what we are worried about is about the food security that is going to be, and then it could be a major societal crisis as well, where, as I mentioned, the migration can at the large scale can start. So for this, obviously, the state needs a global need, and as the Pakistani ambassador was mentioning, that we just contribute 0.4% of the global carbon emissions, and the UN General Secretary, who was here in Pakistan, he has raised the voice. So we are committed. We have the basic infrastructure to deal with that, but we need major resources and global attention for that.
Thank you. And we go to the next question by Joaquim Negreiros de Matos. And I think that it is addressed to both of you. Which one would go first? Professor Luís Tomé, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So are the Indo-Pacific nations, and particularly Pakistan, prepared for this new environment coming from the shortages in supply chain disruptions? Of course, it depends on the country. As far as we all can see, China is much better prepared to deal with this disruption. I think is even profiting from this situation from an economic point of view, from energy point of view, is now becoming the next bigger energy client from Russia. India also is profiting something from this situation, although there is a pressure for rising prices in cereals and energy products. I'm not so sure, in fact, I have some doubts, that Pakistan is economically and politically strong enough to deal with the situation. It is true that at the end of August, the IMF approved a new financial package, I think $3.1 billion. But on the other side, the speed of the Chinese investments in Pakistan is not so high as probably most Pakistani would expect 2 years ago, not only because the Chinese leadership seems to be a little bit disappointed with the money that is going on to Pakistan, but also because now China is having problems with these anti-pandemic rules, COVID-0 target. So Pakistan is probably one of the countries less prepared to deal if the global economic situation worsen, but at the same time is one of the less exposed to the global chains, and because of it is so much dependent on China, that perhaps could offer some leverage to deal with the situation. But I'm not sure if there is enough strong and cohesion in the internal politics, including in the governmental coalition, to deal with the problems, with the social claims, with manifestations in the streets? That is another question. Maybe Professor Qamar Cheema could help us to have a better idea.
Please.
Professor Luís has absolutely made very wonderful points. First of all, obviously, the domestic cohesion is needed. Pakistan's political apparatus is very much polarized. The political class is not going to sit together for even the national security issues, forget these non-traditional security issues. One thing. The second, as far as this question is concerned, that is Pakistan prepared for the new environment and all these things? I think Pakistan seems very much confused because on these things, that how to move on, because on one side we have China, on the one side we have the United States. For instance, Pakistan's former prime minister gave a statement that was pro-Russia, but the Pakistan's incumbent army chief gave a statement which was pro-West. So it seems that even within the institutional framework, the parliament and the other unelected institutions, at times they don't talk, they don't engage, and at the same time, Pakistan is unable to keep a balance that how to keep engaging with the Indo-Pacific, the developments in the Indo-Pacific. So our entire focus is to keep focusing on the nomenclatures that we should call it Asia-Pacific, and we should not call it Indo-Pacific because this is because of India. So I think these are very petty issues on which I think Pakistan needs to have a clarity. We need to have a discourse on that. So this is very unfortunate that, and the leadership is thinking beyond Middle East, beyond some of the Western countries. These Indo-Pacific is the global engine, and as far as this supply chain issues are concerned, these disruptions are concerned, these choke points are concerned, I think they're very much important. But since Pakistan has maintained its position, which is pro-China on this Indo-Pacific, so we have a problem. So we need to take an initiative to get closer with the Western countries. We need to inch forward on this and need to speak directly to the Western powers to be made part of the Indo-Pacific, because we are just a maritime nation and we have a big navy as well. But there seems a confusion that the Chinese may get annoyed, and I think the leadership needs to have a clear vision on that.
Thank you. Any other question? I wonder whether Professor Carlos Gaspar wants to ask a question, because I saw him.
Me? No.
Yes? Well, then I'll ask a question directed to Professor Qamar Cheema. During the last 2 years, there has been, in the international press, lots of articles regarding the Belt and Road Initiative. And they were, in a sense, regarding, on one hand, the problem of the debt regarding to several countries that were in the projects that accepted. And on the other hand, there were articles that focused, apparently, that saying that the Chinese were having second thoughts, that they were having the cold feet, that they were about to tone down the initial ambition. What's your perspective? What's your opinion regarding this?
China? Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I think, yes, there have been questions regarding the debt trap diplomacy. And let me tell you, the political parties in Pakistan, whoever is in power, they cannot even disclose the deal between Pakistan and China, what has happened in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is one of the corridors of the Belt and Road Initiative, one thing. They are not disclosing the deals. We do not know under which rate the Pakistan has got the loans, what are grants, what are loans, what is development, nobody knows. And the Chinese were very annoyed when Imran Khan gave some of the details to the IMF when Pakistan was in an IMF program, one thing. So in my understanding, what Pakistan is concerned is that the Chinese have put a lot of money for two things. One, infrastructure development in terms of road infrastructure, so that much of the Chinese products can travel from China to the Indian Ocean, and they have developed Gwadar port, and they have done a lot of massive development. Second, the Chinese have put a lot of money on energy infrastructure in Pakistan, which was very excellent part. So the first component of the China-Pakistan economic corridor under the BRI was excellent thing. The second thing was to happen, the exclusive economic zones or these industrial zones were to establish so that these exports could have gone in. Pakistan should have contributed into the global supply chain. Pakistan could have contributed into export-led economy, but that part is failing because even the Pakistani businessmen are not comfortable with the Chinese because their products are more cheap, our products are more expensive. The government is not in the position to provide cheap electricity, energy to the people, and obviously there are other issues as well. So largely the business confidence of the local businessmen was not one. So we have seen massive protest in Balochistan, where the Chinese have put a lot of money in Gwadar, where there is a deep sea port as well, and those protests have been legitimate, local, indigenous, genuine. So obviously, and I have heard some of my own federal ministers talking that much of the loans we got from China, they were unnecessary, they were on the high rates, and those were got just for giving a message to the world that we are getting a foreign direct investment in the country. Otherwise, so these are things. But one important thing which I really want to tell to your audience is that because of this CPAC, Pakistan's infrastructure development was there. Pakistan's infrastructure transformation, which was needed, that was there after many years, and those particularly in those areas of Balochistan which remained underdeveloped, impoverished, and were not under the radar of the federal government for long. So the good thing is we got the infrastructure. What we need is that we need to take advantage of this infrastructure to have an export-led economic growth. Yes.
Mr. Ambassador, can I add just a comment,
Sure,
a brief comment?
Sure, please.
Just to mention that 7 years since its launch, the CPEC is nowhere to close to a functional economic corridor, and it may never become one. And Gwadar port sits idle, and overland Sino-Pakistan trade remains very modest despite an increase before the pandemic. And we are mentioning a project, the CPEC, related with the Belt and Road Initiative, worth around an estimated $62 billion US dollars. But we never know if at some time the corridor will function or not. So it is true there is a debt trap. It is true there is the expectation of huge and more investments coming from China to Pakistan. But the reality, at least until now, it's quite different that we are supposing in 2015 or 2020 even. Thank you.
No, but when I asked the question, I was asking and thinking also regarding the Chinese themselves and the idea that, according to some press reports, they were having cold feet. They had this big, ambitious plan. They were very enthusiastic about it. But nowadays, in retrospective, they were not as sure as they were some time ago, and they would probably kind of repack the whole thing in a less ambitious program. Do you have any idea regarding this, Professor Luís Tomé?
No, I think a lot of things, we don't know what is being discussed inside the Chinese leadership. We know that they are having problems. The economic situation is a priority for the President Xi Jinping. There is coming the Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. But in relation to the Belt and Road Initiative, in my view, is now complemented with the other major Chinese initiative presented by President Xi Jinping, precisely the Global Security Initiative. Yeah. So from now on, it is clear that the Belt and Road Initiative is not only an economic initiative with economic purposes, but is linked to geopolitical goals of China and related with this new great initiative, a global security initiative. But now we need to wait and see what is coming from the next Chinese Communist Congress.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'll give the floor now to the Portuguese ambassador, Paulo Neves Pocinho, please. Paulo, you have the floor. You have to put the mic on. Yeah.
Já está, não? Muito boa tarde a todos. Boa tarde, Sr. Embaixador Freitas Ferraz. I would like to thank Mr. Qamar Cheema and to thank Professor Tomé. It's very interesting to see the different perceptions of that come from the same issue, coming from Portugal and coming from Pakistan. I don't have questions. I just would like to make a small comment. Usually when I try to think about Pakistan, I try to think also in the historical perspective. And I become to think that Pakistan is in fact a very young country in a very complex environment with a legacy, even colonial legacy, still very strong. With borders with countries very complicated. For my experience in Pakistan for these 3 years, I also feel Pakistan is it's very diverse. Pakistan has around 30 languages, so it's very rich culturally. And in that, taking into account that this is such a young country and so diverse, sometimes I feel that it's still looking for its place in the world, both externally and also internally. And this makes Pakistan a very complex society. But I would like just to underline that what I saw in Pakistan, and many times I was surprised, it's nearly all issues are discussed, and Pakistanis are very frank and open, and to pointing the fingers, what is wrong, what is right, to giving their opinions. And there are many Pakistans, many trends of opinions, and it becomes very complex, but very fascinating. So people say usually that there is never a dull day in Pakistan. It is true, but it is true also because there is a lot of debate. There is a lot of thinking, and now also Pakistan is suffering from internal problems, but also from the global problems that it didn't create, like the floods. So. For my 3 years, I came to appreciate a little bit Pakistan. It's just my message I wanted to share, and thank you for making possible this event from the Diplomatic Institute. Thank you.
Professor Qamar Cheema, please, can you read a question that is addressed to you on the chat? It's like, if the institutions don't talk, as Dr. Qamar Cheema told, regarding foreign affairs, isn't this a major problem for the future internal stability? Or they talk and prefer to maintain a double or triple standard to gain benefits and so on. What's your assessment? What do you want to answer? Please.
Well, I think the most important part in Pakistan's the political apparatus is that the parliament needs to exercise its democratic rights. The political parties at times, they do not pay attention to much of their own power. The parliament doesn't take responsibility of the discourse, and the politicians keep looking at the unelected institutions, normally the military, for having the political solutions, which obviously undermines the will of the people, which undermines how the people in Pakistan they their respect for the democracy is ignored by the parliament itself. So be it the Imran Khan, Nawaz Sharif, Asif Ali Zardari, Shahbaz Sharif, incumbent prime minister, everybody looks at the establishment. We call it the military establishment, that what should be done. The military says that we should not be made the part of the politics, but the politicians drag them in, and so I think this is one of the problems. Second, obviously, on the national security issues, largely there is no input. Largely, I would say, I won't use a sweeping statement, but I would say that largely the foreign affairs are not much of the domain. It is considered this is not much of a domain of the politicians when it comes to, for instance, some of the issues related to US, some of the issues related to India, China, even to the Arab world. So it seems that, and it seems at times that there is a parallel apparatus going on. And for that matter, even the Imran Khan, the most populist leader, is asking the army chief to hold elections and is asking the establishment that there should be fresh elections. Rather, he should talk to the politicians for the fresh elections. So the institutions don't talk in that way. And for instance, the Prime Minister and former Prime Minister Imran Khan, for 3 years and 7 months, he never met an opposition leader. He doesn't want to meet an opposition leader. He believes that I shall not meet because they are corrupt, they have looted the money, so on and so. So I think there is a major divide within the country. It is good at times that people are democratic, people believe in democracy, people believe in electing their own people, but the elected representative must depend on their own power, and they should not look at others' power because the people have empowered them. So they should look at their own capability, capacity, and then they should deliver, rather looking at the institutions which do not wield power, but they have grabbed the power forcefully.
Thank you so much. I wonder if there are still questions. If there aren't any, I will recall that we will have this webinar that can be accessed by those colleagues that I knew that wanted to be present, but because of their work couldn't come, so that we will have this webinar online. I would like also to once again to express my solidarity with Pakistan, with what is happening, and also to make a vow or a wish that in Sharm el-Sheikh, when they meet for the COP27, that they look at what is happening in Pakistan, and that they will be bolder to go further regarding the environmental policies that are needed for the whole world. So once again, thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Luís Tomé. Thank you, Professor Qamar Cheema. Thank you so much. We will be in touch.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.